Did you know that the British Empire once ruled over a quarter of the world's land and nearly a third of its population? But here's the shocking part. It wasn't achieved through conquest alone. So how did this relatively small island nation achieve such great dominance? In this video, we will explore the factors that contributed to the rise of the British Empire, including its geographical location, naval power, and emphasis on trade. We will also examine some of the legacy of the empire, both positive and negative. The empire had a profound impact on the countries it colonized, and its legacy continues to shape global politics and society today. Let's see how. The British Empire, though not holding dominion over the entire world, stands as the most expansive empire in history, spanning across numerous centuries and continents. The geographical advantage of being an island nation, coupled with the unification of Scotland and England in 1603 to form Great Britain, afforded clear borders and protection against invasion, with the vast expanse of the North Atlantic Ocean and the North Sea as natural barriers. This geographical disposition facilitated maritime exploration and expansion. Central to the British Empire's supremacy was the sheer size and strength of the Royal Navy, which outstripped other naval forces in terms of investment, ships, and firepower. The government and citizens of the British Empire shared a profound conviction that their future prosperity lay in the vast expanses of the ocean. They recognized the key role of overseas trade and the necessity of an unbreakable fleet to safeguard their interests both at sea and on land. This takes us to the question, how did they ensure their maritime dominance? The British Empire consistently allocated valuable resources to fund the Royal Navy. Moreover, the empire's emphasis on trade played a huge role in its big growth across continents. Rather than pursuing dominance through conquest, the British Empire focused on amassing wealth and expanding its trade networks. This approach not only enriched the empire but also contributed significantly to its triumphant global expansion. The British Empire achieved success in creating an appealing environment for others to join, especially following their successful colonization efforts in North America and the West Indies during the 1600s. During this period, the British Empire implemented a commercial system that proved highly advantageous for both Great Britain and its overseas territories. Let's take a closer look at that. Colonies were granted exclusive rights to sell their products in the British market, which meant that trade had to be conducted using British ships. In 1651, the Navigation Act further shaped this economic system by promoting a closed economy between the empire and its colonies. This policy mandated that all imports to the colonies must originate from Great Britain, and all colonial exports were required to be sent directly to the British market via British ships. This approach not only boosted British trade but also hardened the economic ties between the colonies and the motherland. But that wasn't all, there was even more. In the same century, the British East India Company appeared as a big player in trade, connecting Great Britain with East Asia, Southeast Asia, and India. Initially, the company focused on the spice trade, but it later diversified its offerings to include silk, cotton, tea, opium, and more. Despite its origins as a purely trade-driven enterprise, politics eventually became entwined with the East India Company as it sought to establish and control global trade markets. This expansion of British economic interests and influence helped in the rise of the British Empire greatly. The British Empire expanded across many continents like Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and the Americas. Unlike some empires that used force and claims of power to grow, the British mostly began by setting up trading posts and systems. This approach helped them build economic connections and peaceful influence, leading to the vast British Empire we know today. Nonetheless, they weren't always so peaceful. The British Empire had its share of conflicts and wars. They fought in battles like the American Revolutionary War and faced unrest in India. They weren't always peaceful in their approach. The rivalry with the French also led to the 7 Years' War, making Britain a more powerful force across the globe. Let's take a closer look at that. In 1775, the American Revolutionary War erupted because the British Empire sent troops to quell the no taxation without representation movement in the American colonies. France and Spain joined forces with the newly declared United States against Britain during the war. In 1783, at the Peace of Paris, British had to accept American independence and cede territories. This great loss prompted Great Britain to shift its focus toward Asia, Africa, and Australia, often referred to by historians as the start of the Second British Empire. Although trade with the United States continued after independence, the empire redirected its attention to the uncolonized coastlines of Australia. This land had been discovered by Dutch explorer Willem Jansen in 1606 and later claimed for the British Crown by James Cook in 1770 under the name of New South Wales. But this wasn't the only big loss the British Empire had. In their fervor for expansion in South Asia, the British Empire found themselves embroiled in a series of conflicts. Starting with the Battle of Plassey in 1757, by 1774 the British were entangled in a string of military campaigns. These included the Anglo-Mysore Wars, which persisted until 1799, along with confrontations in regions like Sindh and Burma. These conflicts accelerated the consolidation efforts of the British East India Company in the region. To ensure their power and dominance, the British implemented a policy known as the Doctrine of Lapse, which barred Hindu rulers from ascending to the throne if they were not the natural heirs. When the current Hindu ruler passed away or was removed, the British would seize control of their state. These actions, coupled with other measures aimed at imposing westernization on the Hindu population, contributed to the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857 to 1859. Frustrated with heavy-handed British rule, Indian troops, particularly the Sepoys, initiated a rebellion that quickly spread across the nation. Eventually, peace was declared in July of 1859, and the British East India Company's rule came to an end, although British control under the Crown persisted until 1947. After this hard loss, the British Empire started to shrink. To push its global dominance, they started a last ambition in Africa, but there was one big problem. During this period, Great Britain also sought to expand its presence in Africa. Although the Royal African Company had been involved in the profitable slave trade since the 17th century until its abolition in 1807, it wasn't until the 19th century that the British recognized the potential advantages of establishing trade routes across the African continent. Their goal was to establish outposts stretching from Egypt in the north to the southern regions of Africa. However, as the British Empire pursued its African ambitions, it found itself in competition with other growing European powers, such as Italy and Germany. This rivalry eventually led to the convening of the Berlin Conference in 1884. The purpose of this conference was to establish some order and cooperation among the competing colonizers. Ultimately, Great Britain secured control over most of northeastern Africa and the entirety of southern Africa. At its height in the continent, the British Empire ruled over approximately 30% of the African population. At the peak of its influence, the British Empire held sway over approximately 22 to 25% of the Earth's land surface, and by 1938, it governed roughly 20% of the world's population. It's truly astonishing how a nation as compact as Great Britain could wield such vast imperial influence. This huge achievement was made possible by several key factors, including geographical advantages, a dominant naval force, and a strategic emphasis on trade and wealth rather than aggressive territorial expansion driven solely by imperial power. If you enjoyed this video, check out our video on how the world would look if Hitler had won World War II by clicking the link on the screen or in the description.